Boa noite, good evening. Welcome to the second event of the R series on artificial intelligence. R is a science communication group here at Champalimaud. And I am Lydia, research technician at Champalimaud's Systems Neuroscience Lab and your host for the evening. In December last year, during the first event of this series, we talked about the past of AI, its beginning in the 40s, and its evolution. Today, we will dive into the present of AI, providing a perspective on the last 10 years and a couple of years into the future. A present in which AI is everywhere, in which we all are living with AI, and a time of change. In May, there will be the last event of this series about the future of AI. Don't miss it. Tonight's event will have an overview of AI in the present and its transformative power. A short series of talks from our invited speakers, focusing on the impact of AI in different fields, and a roundtable discussion between them. Finally, to end the evening, just outside the auditorium, you will have an opportunity to talk to the speakers over some drinks and experience some demos created here at Champalimaud with the help of AI, including submersion, the piece that you just saw here on the big screen. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming our invited speakers, Simone Lackner, multidisciplinary researcher working as a diplomat between science, art, society, and policy. João Santinha, senior biomedical engineering researcher in Champalimaud's Digital Surgery Lab. James Anstice, head of theory of knowledge at the Oeiras International School. Germán Mendes, machine learning lead and project manager at Siemens Energy. Rodolfo Quinters, Portuguese artist whose work uses interactive, generative, and artificial intelligence techniques. And Jacovina Kindilidi, senior associate at the law firm VDA, specializing in cybersecurity and intellectual property. And last but not least, my fellow creative director for this event, Eric De Witt, research associate and head of Champalimaud's Computational Cognitive Decision Science Group, who will start our journeys through living with AI.
So, welcome again, and thank you, Lydia. I'd like to begin our evening by trying to provide some context. And maybe I should begin with the question, why are we talking about artificial intelligence today? The major reason is that suddenly AI is all over the news, and it seems more and more human-like every month. Some of the headlines are scary, and some promise a bright, amazing future, and everyone is wondering what the rise of AI is going to mean for us as humans. So let's take a quick look through a few recent headlines that illustrate why we're having this event today. So this video that was just playing here, and in fact, the videos that you saw when you walked in were generated by AI. This one was generated by a text prompt saying to create something that looked like a drone video. It's from OpenAI's new Sora. However, this is also a video created by Sora where it was asked to create an image or a video of wolf pups playing, and you can see that it doesn't really understand the concept of an individual animal. OpenAI also developed ChatGPT, a large language model, often called an LLM for short, and it's the first one that's become a general-purpose AI chatbot, and you may have interacted with it. And you may have read that ChatGPT appears to actually pass some human-level exams, something that's likely to change education, as we're going to hear from James later. Other AI headlines you might have seen recently paint a complicated picture. For example, Taylor Swift deepfakes have been proliferating, and we have this wonderful image of the Pope, which is a complete fake. In an attempt to manage some of the problems with AI, Google's Gemini recently created overly diverse World War II German soldiers, a problem that comes from trying to manage a system we don't fully understand. Other headlines about AI show us breakthroughs that seem to herald great things to come. Google's AlphaFold is able to dream up new proteins that may provide breakthroughs in medicine, and Google and others are working on diagnostic systems that may help doctors diagnose diseases or end up partially replacing doctors, something that Joao will discuss later. One of my favorite recent headlines was this one, showing that AI can actually allow us to unroll this burnt scroll that was buried after Mount Vesuvius erupted, and it's able to actually decode text, ancient text never before seen and probably impossible without AI. And finally, to cope with the problems that AI might bring, Europe has just passed this landmark legislation, which we're going to hear from more about today in Jacobina's talk. So, what lies behind this surge in AI headlines? Has there been a recent discovery, something that we can understand? Well, first, let's think about how long we've been dealing with AI. How long have we been living with AI? We asked you, how many times do you interact with AI each day? And most of you said about 1 to 3 times. I'm not convinced. So here's a list of things that you may interact with on a daily basis, from a smartphone, Bolt, Instagram, this nice robot that can clean your floors. All of these use some form of AI. You are surrounded by algorithms that are acting on data to make predictions, whether it's about the stock market or a warehouse and its inventory, from detecting barcodes or detecting faces, and of course, personalizing your entire digital world. And this is because AI is just an extension of statistical and machine learning, or the use of algorithms to infer and predict from data. And these algorithms have been used extensively since the era of big data began about 20 years ago. The development of large neural networks has recently allowed various kinds of AI to start performing at near human levels on many tasks. However, the foundations that Google, Meta, and OpenAI use to build these AIs comes from basic research, from neuroscience, computer science, statistics, going all the way back to the 1940s. And if you did not see our prior R event on the history of AI, the roots of AI, you can find it on our YouTube channel. But for context, here's the timeline that we covered from about 1940 to relatively recently. And we're going to now zoom in on a few things that happened during this time. But I want to start by reminding you that one of the biggest things that's happened in the last 10 years is the arrival of these critters, GPUs, which are, in fact, just processing systems that were designed to provide better graphics for gaming, but are able to power the training and the processing of large neural networks, along with the growth of big data. So let me start with something that I use every day to unlock my iPhone, face detection. And in 2014, Meta, then Facebook, developed something called DeepFace. And it takes a face and then uses a series of layers of neurons, these are artificial neurons, to slowly transform the face into something that it can then label and identify you as a particular person. And it can do this very, very accurately. In fact, 97.25% accurately, and that's just 0.28% less than a human. Now, all of this was based on research that had been done on how the brain actually sees things and how your neurons in your brain do it, but it's been cleverly designed and engineered to do a very specific task very, very well. And we gave Meta the special ingredient they needed, tens of millions of photos and our permission to use them. Now, something that became controversial, this is something that became controversial when it started using these to tag people without their permission. And in fact, as you probably know, Meta was also using AI to personalize our data feeds, the things that we see on Facebook and Instagram, something that Simona will discuss later. And at the same time, they were sharing this data with researchers, some of whom were actually interested in manipulating political elections. You may remember a company called Cambridge Analytica, which used our data to try to affect elections in the US and UK. So let's now talk about another major development that was combining these kinds of deep networks with reinforcement learning, an approach that is directly derived from neuroscience and psychology. I don't know whether you've heard of Ivan Pavlov and Pavlov's dog, but he found that if you ring a bell and you pair it with food, the dog would learn to expect food when you rang the bell. A very simple idea. Well, it turns out that this concept actually exists in our brains. We learn to expect future rewards, and we learn to guide our actions to obtain future rewards. This has been formalized as something called reinforcement learning algorithms, or RL. If we combine neural networks and RL, as was proposed in the 90s, we can get them to learn to do things. With the advance of lots of data and lots of processing power, Google was able to train a network to play a series of Atari games. And the way they did it is they used one neural network to understand the game, your position in the game, and the position of various other objects. And then they used another network to learn what to expect when you made a move. And in the middle was this very simple RL learning algorithm. Now, as they added more processing power and they did clever things, they were able to actually develop this over a couple of years to beat the best humans at Go, chess, and shogi. And reinforcement learning is also used to fine-tune the latest large language models to better mimic human behavior by basically encouraging to do things that are more human-like. Now, the real change that has been driving the current batch of AI headlines is generative AI. Generative AI is when we use these same kinds of deep networks, but in clever ways to generate new things, be it images, speech, or almost anything. Using an approach that's sort of similar to deep RL, there was a concept introduced called the Generative Adversarial Network, proposed in 2014. In this case, we take a network, like this one that could be like DeepFace, which evaluates these faces and tells you whether it's a good face or a bad face. A second network tries to generate these faces, and in a competition, it learns to produce better and better faces. In the end, you can actually train these things to produce very realistic faces, and by about 2018, there was a website called Real or Fake, which was putting up photos and asking you to guess which one was real and which one was fake. Now, this is one of those technologies that has real-world uses. So here is an example of how you can take an actor and transform him into Freddie Mercury of the band Queen using the same exact technology. Here, the next step that came was in 2015, using ideas from physics. Computational neuroscientists suggest a way to do away with the adversarial part and simply go from noise to images. This is called a diffusion process, and it's the thing that powers Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, which can now take text and generate these beautiful images. In fact, the images that we saw at the beginning, and probably many of the deepfakes that you've seen online, are now being created using this technique or even transformers, which we're going to get to next. The final innovation is this thing called the neural transformer, developed in 2017 by Google, and which now powers all of the large language models and is replacing many of the other techniques because it's much easier to train to do very powerful things. By 2019 and 2020, transformers had basically taken over. And transformers were all about this thing called attention. But what is attention? Well, attention is basically a concept from psychology, was actually played with by early researchers using early neural networks. And it's basically, how do you pay attention to one thing in a mix? For example, I want to listen to one voice in this crowd, or if I needed to identify Waldo, I might move my attention around the scene to try to find him. This basic concept can now be used with neural networks where they take some input and they get to learn to pay attention to things in order to predict an output. In the case of large language models, where this is very powerful, for example, if it's reading the word "it" and the input sentence was, "the animal didn't cross the street," it can learn to pay attention to these things that it might have actually been related to. Now, where are we? Critical to training all of these AIs, as I've said, is lots and lots of data. To train the most recent LLMs like ChatGPT and Gemini, you require approximately 1 trillion training examples. So here's a plot from 2003 to 2020, and down here the number of training data points used is 1,000, and up here you have 1 trillion. And this is basically a line. Now, this is what we call an exponential growth process. That means that there's basically a multiplication of 10 as we go along the time axis. And this is true not just for the amount of data that's consumed, but it's also true for the number of parameters in these neural network models. They're also growing exponentially. And it's true for the amount of computation that's required to train and run them. This means that only very large corporations like Google and Meta and OpenAI, with their data, money, and resources, can train these AIs to achieve near human-level performance, even though most of the ideas were actually originally developed in academic research institutes. And of course, all of this means that training AI requires an enormous amount of energy, something that we might want to be concerned about considering that we're facing climate change. However, AI may be able to help us with that, as Germaine will tell us a little later. The last thing I want to mention is that there has been something a little bit profound as we have done this exponential scaling. So plotted here is performance relative to some human benchmark. And what you can see is that some things grew sort of slowly, but then there have been really big jumps in the last 10 years. And these really big jumps seem to come from just scaling things up. Now, the problem is we don't understand why. So, hopefully you have a better sense now of the ingredients that have pushed AI into the headlines, ideas flowing back and forth between academia and industry, combined with the sudden availability of big data and lots of processing power. But what does this mean for us? Let us hear 6 views now on living with AI, what it has been, what it is now, and how it may be affecting our lives over the next few years. So, to begin, let me hand the floor over to Simona.
Thank you, Eric and Lydia, for the nice introduction and for the invitation to be here and for you all to join in this evening of mutual learning. So let me put a complex observation into a form of logic. We are in the middle of a massive global digital transformation, colliding with anti-science and post-truth movements. Social media is bombarding us with information that is driven by algorithms that are based on our implicit cognitive biases, playing with our emotions, our well-being, and the understanding of reality. I'm strongly concerned how the concept of objective truth is fading out and how lies are passing not only into history, but jeopardize also our immediate present, affecting individual psychology, group dynamics, and ultimately democracy. Historically, as well as today, the main purpose of media, such as newspapers, books, and television, is to provide relevant and accurate information for society. They present political and scientific understanding that ideally should help the public to shape their opinion so that they can participate in an informed way in democratic processes. Thanks to scientific progress and innovation, technology has been evolving, from the printing press to the internet. However, with the present digital transformation, tools change faster than ever. So media outlets and end consumers face constant change, to which we need to adapt quickly. Fake news, propaganda, and disinformation are nothing new and existed already in the past. But today, there's an important difference to consider. that thanks to the development of internet and AI, information is traveling faster, farther, and is personally targeted. So we all find ourselves not only in a virtual world, but also embedded in a new business model of the attention economy, where our attention provides data and our data turns into money. Information is cheap, easy, and omnipresent, and it can be personally targeted. So it is engineered to seek our attention, playing with our emotions and biases, both important factors that underlie our decision-making processes and opinion formation. Now, where we have these new language model tools, such as ChatGPT, that are trained on our biased data traffic on the internet, returning curated and convincing information as an objective truth with high confidence, we go into the danger of conscious and unconscious mass production of misinformation. I'm very much interested in the role of cognitive biases and its impact on opinion formation, especially related to confidence in our own knowledge. And I think it's very important to be aware of it and understand them. So in a multidisciplinary team of researchers from the field of neuroscience, physics, and psychology, we had a closer look on the interplay of knowledge and confidence. The idea was that how much you know will linearly correlate with your confidence, how much you think you know. So if you know a lot, your confidence is quite high. If you know very little, your confidence is very low. So we used a set of multiple choice format questions with true, false, and I don't know as a response to comments such as an atom is bigger than an electron. So if one wants to act as a completely rational person, one either knows the answer, or if not, you would say, I don't know, demonstrating intellectual humility and staying on this blue line, where knowledge and confidence grow linearly. But what we found is that a great number of participants found themselves above that blue line, because they got some of the questions incorrect and failed to admit that they simply don't know, therefore overestimating the actual knowledge and demonstrating overconfidence. So the result showed us three important findings. First, confidence grows faster than knowledge and peaks at intermediate level. Second, respondents with medium levels of knowledge and high levels of confidence also had the least positive attitudes towards science. And third, strikingly, respondents with the medium level of knowledge made up the majority of the population, European-wide. So these three findings define a confidence gap where we think it is most likely that we find people that will be susceptible to fake news spreading. So our inherited biases, such as overconfidence, together with confirmation bias, where we only accept new information that fits our belief system, inform AI what we like and share on the internet. So we have a reciprocal human-machine interaction. The biases we give AI will mirror us back, with the danger to reinforce false information and beliefs. As we train AI to be more human-like, we are likely to continue building our biases within it. So most of the AI tools, such as ChatGPT, are trained on the complete unfiltered internet and social media, which are many times unmoderated. Therefore, it's important to be aware that its output reflects the average knowledge of its training as the objective truth, and with great confidence. So this has great danger to the end users reading convincing, curated text, unreflected and unaware, possibly raising their overconfidence. So as we start to treat tools like ChatGPT as the new knowledge authority, almost like a superhuman, we maybe need to ask, should ChatGPT maybe learn to say, I don't know? Should it show confidence intervals for its outputs? I don't know. But what I'm convinced of is that AI is a tool. It's made by humans and should be used to increase our well-being. So it should be on us to decide how the algorithm should be trained. It needs awareness of how our inherited biases impact AI development. We need to reflect, be emotionally aware, and practice intellectual humility before we like, share, or comment to information. Because all our inherited cognitive biases go into AI unless we think about them, and not only as scientists, but as online media consumers and consumers and producers, and therefore conscious or unconscious trainers of new evolving AI tools. Thank you very much. Wow.
Good night, everyone. Thank you, Simona. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Lydia. Thank you all for coming. So, I'm a biomedical engineer, and I've been working in healthcare for 10 years. I've been working alongside doctors, seeing their daily routines and daily practices, and I've also been a patient. And let's imagine a scenario where you are feeling sick. In which scenario would you rather be? Sitting with a doctor that is attentively listening to you, or one that is behind the computer typing? I would go for the first. But let's put that into perspective. Today, we are more than 8 billion people with a current life expectancy of 73 years old. And our current lifestyles has increased the risk of chronic diseases like cardiovascular and respiratory disease, diabetes, cancer, you name it. And in Europe alone, we have at least, or more than 1/3 of the population of adults with at least one of these chronic diseases. And to make this even worse, in Europe alone, we have a shortage of 1.8 billion healthcare workers, and the existing workforce, 40% of that is dealing with depression and anxiety, and 70% is feeling burnout. This is further aggravated by inefficiencies in clinical procedures and patient journeys with very little to no automation on repetitive and bureaucratic tasks. So naturally, coming and developing my work on the interface of technology and healthcare, I believe that AI can have a major impact on the burden on healthcare workers, on improving patient care, and positively impact the healthcare procedures for a more personal, more connected, and more human care. One example of this, connected with the examples that we just, the exercise that we did just mentally just a few moments ago, there is already AI that is used to take notes from consultations that you have with your doctor, freeing up more the doctor to pay more attention to you and to save the doctor up to 70 hours in paperwork every month. We can also make doctors' report easier to understand for patients, but also for their colleagues. And within the Champalimaud Foundation Digital Surgery Lab, we have developed an application that is able to listen to the radiologist dictate a report and using a large language model to simplify and structure these normally unstructured reports to be more concise and clear. AI, as Eric has mentioned, it can also be used to improve diagnosis, and in the case of breast screening, it can be used as a second reader to avoid mistakes. It can reduce, acting as a second reader, it can reduce the workload of radiologists by 44%, while increasing the cancer detection rate in 28%, detecting more cancers, including more smaller cancers that are hard to get. And while this could imply a shift in roles and jobs, keep in mind that we are currently living in a shortage of healthcare workforce. Also, within the Digital Surgery Lab, we have been developing AI-based and augmented reality-based medical devices to revolutionize breast cancer surgeries and clinical procedures. Currently, a patient that will undergo breast surgery is always needed to treat breast cancer. The patient might undergo a mastectomy, which is a complete amputation of the patient's breast, or a breast-conserving surgery, which is a preferred procedure. But we are always acquiring medical imaging that is used then by the surgeons to do the surgical planning and decide which path the patient would go. But currently, we have poor surgical plannings, and this leads to sometimes prescribing mastectomies where a breast-conserving surgery could be performed. Additionally, we have this preoperative localization procedure, which is highly invasive and uncomfortable. I would even call it barbaric, where a metallic wire is passed through the patient's skin, you can see it here, to the center of the lesion, such that during the day of the surgery, the surgeon can have the information about the location of the tumor, but it's faced with insufficient and inaccurate information about the tumor boundaries. And because it doesn't have this information, in 30% of the times, the patients would have to go a second surgery to fully remove the tumor. With the tools that we are getting, what we are trying to aim is to use these medical images to create a personalized 3D model of the patient, like a digital twin of the breast of the patient, that is going to be used to do better surgical planning, leading to fewer mastectomies. We can remove the preoperative localization, so no more wires inside the patient's breast, and during the day of the surgery, the surgeon can actually see the tumor through the skin of the patient in real time for more accurate surgeries. And here is a little demo of what we have achieved so far, where you can see in the mannequin the location of a tumor inside the patient's breast. This is what the surgeon would see. It can see some additional information about the cancer, and it can also highlight the cancer such that it can better understand the shape of the tumor to do like this conserving surgery, where you only want to remove the tumor, but leave as much as healthy tissue as you can. And you can see this demo outside as well. So even though I'm very positive on what AI can achieve, the translation of research into clinical practice is hard, and there is still a long road ahead for the widespread adoption of healthcare, AI in healthcare. Lots of issues have contributed to this slow adoption of AI in healthcare, and one of those is that data is often kept within the institutions that they are acquired, in which they are acquired, so it's siloed, not available in large quantities that AI needs to do to create robust solutions, and often is only available to big tech companies that can pay a lot to access this data. Furthermore, the use of AI in healthcare requires lots of domain knowledge to avoid mistakes. And here we have an example of a very well-known researcher that was claiming to have developed AI to detect pneumonia in chest X-rays, to only be then discovered that there was a methodological error that would lead to wrong diagnosis. But we are trying to overcome these issues of domain knowledge and multidisciplinary teams that we need in the development of AI through education within the Champalimaud Foundation, also promoting this education with doctors and future doctors from faculties of medicine. And nonetheless, despite all of these hurdles, we have seen the medtech flourish. You can see a lot of companies in different specialties, and there are plenty of health and wellness startups and apps, but all of these efforts need to be done with attention and complying with current medical device regulations, and especially with the new European legislation, to ensure that we are correctly applying and using AI without harming patients and without further increasing inequalities, and if possible, reduce them. Thank you. And I would...
A conversation in my Theory of Knowledge class, 8th of January, 2024. A student, let's call him John, walks into my classroom a few minutes late after lunch, mobile phone in one hand, shot of espresso in the other. I like John. I've taught him for a few years, and we've got a pretty good relationship. In the minutes after class, he often stays behind to have a quick chat about surfing or football. He has a kind of drawling somnolence to him, a perma-tiredness that he carries around at school all day, but which falls away the moment he touches on one of these topics. John's 18, and in a few weeks, he's planning to move abroad to go to university. He's hoping to study business in the Netherlands, though it's touch and go if he'll get the grades he needs to do this. John, when you've got yourself settled in, could you come over so we could have a quick chat about your essay? Why? Is there a problem? No problem. I'd just like to clarify a few points, if that's okay. John nods, frowning, then comes over and sits down beside me. John, there are some really interesting ideas in this essay, though from your plan, I hadn't anticipated you taking such a philosophical approach. I was wondering if you could explain some of these ideas, just to help me understand your thought process a little better. For example, here, where you ask whether we need custodians of knowledge in order to navigate the labyrinthine complexities of existence. Or maybe here, where you suggest that we should, in the spirit of Nietzsche's Übermensch, harness the will to power within ourselves in order to transcend traditional epistemic structures. For context, I didn't exactly recognize John's voice in these lines, or the voice of any student that I'd ever met or taught in my life. But I thought I'd ask him to clarify. And when I did, his eyes widened, his pupils dilated, and he started to scroll wildly up and down his essay, trying to reacquaint himself with words and ideas that, in theory at least, were his own. That in theory at least were his own. Can I go back? My hunch is that John's essay has been co-authored by AI. And from providing teachers with creative and exciting lesson ideas to helping them with a stack of marking, it's already changing our working lives. And for students, from helping them to identify the procedural errors in a maths problem, to acting as a personal tutor, coaching them and guiding them in the specific areas where they need most academic support, it could potentially accelerate learning in a way that would have been unimaginable just 2 years ago. All of this is revolutionary. But right now, these potentialities are a secondary concern to the main issue that was ruining John's Monday afternoon and that was causing such a headache in classrooms and staff rooms and university faculties around the world. And that is the issue of academic dishonesty, which is teacher speak for cheating. So where do we go with this? Well, some potential solutions have been put forward. For example, some suggest that students should complete all assessments in a controlled environment. It's more timed examinations. Another option is to scrap screens and to have students work entirely on paper. Another option again is for students to complete their assessments on a teacher-controlled platform, one where they can go back and review a student's work in order to assess as one word is added to another, so they can see if a sudden block of text has appeared, cut and pasted out of the ether and into the body of the work. This would have been useful with John. Due scrutiny should, of course, be given to all of these ideas, not least because we should be especially mindful of not exacerbating an existing system that already accounts for the fact that 1/3 of teenagers currently experience an anxiety disorder linked to a culture of testing. This data taken from a recent study conducted in the United States. But I believe that asking how we can ensure our students' academic integrity in this new landscape of AI is to ask the wrong question. Instead, we should be thinking more deeply about assessment itself. Specifically, we must ask ourselves 2 questions. What is assessment for? And if it's really necessary, how can it best be done? And my contention is that you cannot ask these questions without fundamentally rethinking what it is that we want from education itself. Education matters, doesn't it? It really does. It's one of those things that we all agree on. And it's something that's especially clear when you speak to the parents of young children, something I've done a lot in the last few years, as I have 2 young children myself. And one thing you don't hear on a Sunday morning when a parent is pushing a swing is, you know what? I just don't care where my child goes to school. Education, it's just not important to me. In fact, when I have these conversations, what I've found is that overwhelmingly people say that education is among the most important things to them. Why is that? Why is education so important to us? It's one of those questions, isn't it? One of those questions where the answer feels so basic, so obvious, that to even ask may sound disingenuous because, of course, we know why education is important, right? At least we think we know. When I ask my students this question, they generally settle on 3 main ideas. The first is that they say that education is important because they associate it with money. a big house, a nice car, exotic holidays. The second reason is entirely bound up with the first, and that is that they associate education with employment status. You hear lots of students who want to become doctors, lawyers, and engineers. Get a couple of entrepreneurs. No teachers, of course, that's mutually exclusive with point one. And the third reason, and here I really do commend my students' honesty, is they say that education is important because, well, because their parents tell them it's important. And with one or two notable exceptions, this is what my students tell me every single year. And I would say that my students' ideas are entirely congruous with what our culture and systems of education encourage them and us all to believe, and that is that the value of education is entirely extrinsic. And in this, AI is simply amplifying a pre-existing culture whose natural motivation and endpoint is a grade rather than meaningful learning, where we are encouraged to subjugate our passions, our strengths, and the needs of the world in the pursuit of some shallow and narrowly defined idea of success. Success is defined through the lens of money, status, and normative cultural values, values which we know do not promote well-being when at school or after it. There's no doubt that John is far from alone in exploring the possibilities of AI. He and hundreds of thousands of other students just like him will be making use of this technology right now to write their assessments. Another study that came out of the United States recently showed that 43% of first-year college undergraduates used ChatGPT last year to help write their coursework and did not cite it. And to be honest, who can blame them when such a premium is put on the grade at the expense of the learning? I know that in my role as an examiner in the coming weeks, I can expect to receive a veritable avalanche of essays written by 17 and 18-year-olds with the help of AI. I fear there will be a lot of Nietzsche. So where do we go with this? Well, AI shows us that we must rethink assessment and learning and the values which underpin these two things. The value of an education should not be determined as a narrowly economic concept, nor in terms of status, or by what society tells us. Instead, we must focus on bringing a culture of intrinsic reward to the heart of what we foster in our classrooms, our lecture theatres, and in our homes. The point of education in an AI world is much the same as it always should have been. That is to bring joy and meaning and purpose to our lives while helping to address the many global issues that exist in the world today. From artists to architects, and lawyers to librarians, from stay-at-home fathers to CEO mothers. That is the world that I would like my students to grow up in. AI should matter to us all right now because it should make us rethink what we want from education itself. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Eric, Lydia, thanks for having me. And let me go through and introduce you how the AI is doing a little revolution in the engineering world. But before that, let me give you some description about what is engineering, what is this concept, and what I'm doing in my day-to-day. So engineering, as we can see, is a list to design, to develop structures, to create manufacturing processes, build machines or apparatuses. At the end, it could be a combination of all of this. And what I'm doing in my day-to-day, I'm a machine learning engineer or AI engineering. I'm in the back end of all of this. Me and my team, we are creating the AI solutions to resolve and have in somehow a simple answer or an answer for a very big complex problems. And those problems are about what? In this case, for me, I work in the energy industry. What does it mean? For creating energy or producing energy, a transmission of the energy, or decarbonization of the different industries. But what does it mean? So take a look at this. This is a gas turbine. As you have seen, this is a huge machine. This is almost weighs 500 tons, just this, and this is most, one of the smallest one. And this gas turbine is used for producing energy, not only for our households, not only for the offices, for our hospitals, or for charging our electric cars. This is also for energizing different kind of industries, pharmaceuticals, food industry, car making. At the end, everything that we consume, that we are, our lifestyles, in somehow are being produced are being energized by these kind of things. That's why it's important to have the AI here. It's how we do the interpretation of the AI and the role and the big role that AI is going to play. Why? As humans, we communicate between each other with words and so on. But these machines also communicate with us. This machine has thousands and thousands and thousands of sensors. And those sensors are in real time giving us a different reality on what's happening or with each of those parts of those machines. Have you ever imagined if this machine, and I'm going to put you this in perspective, just imagine that this city, this auditorium, only depends on the energy that is produced by this machine. What happens if you are not planning an outage or you are not planning a downtime? This conference will happen at all. Our city will be totally blacked out. At the end, this is not going to happen in this reality. Probably you're going to see some changes in the bill at the end of your month. Probably your clothing is going to be a little bit more expensive. But this is the reality and why this is so mission critical for this space. And this is how AI is helping us. Through these communications, the sensors allow us to create this, a digital twin. A digital twin is a virtual replica on what's actually happening in the real time with these machines. In this case, without our turbine. How is it works? It flows data from the physical turbine to this kind of environment when it's going to be processed in real time. What is the make sense of this? Because we cannot have thousands or hundreds of engineering looking every day at one sensor, meaning this sensor is going up, this sensor is going down. The main idea is the AI can help us to understand what happened with this machine, what is happening in the present, and what we can do with the future. We can do simulations, we can have different scenarios, and actually we can forecast different things. Let me put you another example. Is if I want to increase the power output of this machine, because I have to power up another part of my city, what will happen with this machine? We have to plan a new outage, a new downtime. Do we have all my parts are degrading faster? What's happening in there? And for that matter, this AI is helping us because it's nearly impossible for a group of engineers to take into consideration all these scenarios. And allow me to show you an example of what's happening and what this is matter for us. Because besides the energy that is being produced, this is important. Emissions. When everybody that we are here, you may know that when we combustion fossil fuels, we are actually emitting nocive gases to the atmosphere, right? So we are increasing our footprint, right? These machines also run on fossil fuels, most of them. So we have to keep track on what's happening there. What are those emissions that we are emitting to the atmosphere? Because actually, at the end, this is affecting our lifestyles, just like NOx, CO2, CO, right? So me and my team, we are developing models to actually control what's happening here. What is the main idea? That we actually can reduce the footprint of the different industries, going towards the decarbonization of the different industries, replacing the way how they energize their industries. Actually, we can fulfill the promise of having a low impact. And actually, and the most important, and Jacobina probably is going to tell us, is about how we can comply different regulations of the governments. Because these, of course, are heavy penalties and heavy fines in here. But at the end, it's not only this. Because this cannot be innocuous at the end. There's a lot of drawbacks or challenges that has to be addressed here. One of these challenges is, can we rely 100% on this kind of algorithms? Are we sure that we can leave or let these kind of algorithms control not only our chatbot for doing probably help us to writing an email, but are we allowing this kind of machine learning or AI models to control what we are, or to proceed with our lifestyle? This is very important. Also, another challenge is about the costs. Not only the cost that is important for producing this, but also for implementing this. Because most of those AIs are being trained and is highly costly. But one of my major concerns are this. The energy consumption that all AI is consuming right now. What I can tell you is for the year 2023, all the AI that was trained in that year consumed as much as the Netherlands. Do you know how many people there is in the Netherlands? Around 8 million people. And we are sure that, as Eric has said, the computational requirements of the AI is going to increase exponentially. For sure, the energy needed is going to increase a lot. What does it mean? How we can contribute? And my final thoughts here is AI also can help us to reduce our footprint by two ways. First, by the consumer side. In the consumer side is us, okay? And how us, not as a person, but also as professionals, we can reduce that footprint. As an example, have you ever imagined that you can somehow schedule or let an AI turn your AC or do your washer to wash your clothes? Or actually, we can reduce creating and having other attempts in the engineering to create more efficient hardware to train this AI, as like the tensor process units or neural process units, and different, or even the quantum computing that is now in the world of everyone. But at the end, there's another challenge that it has to become from the producer side. The companies that produces the energy has to be aware that it has to be designed different kind of setups, and the AI can help us creating with the generative design, creating elements like basically accelerate the creation of the hardware that can capture the carbon. At the end, in the final questions and thoughts here is like, we can rely. We have to be aware that the AI is going to be here and we are going to be present. We cannot go off the grid. And being off the grid, are we allowing, and we can be comfortable allowing this AI to control not only what we do in our daily lives, but our lifestyle? Thank you very much for your time. And let me hand it for Rudolf.
Good evening, everyone. For the past 2 decades, I've been asking questions about the nature of the body, behavior, misinformation, deep fakes, power, control, rituals, grief, embodiment, immersion, and transformation. And I've been creating art to explore these questions. Art that is mostly digital, automated, and created with code. With all new technological revolutions, the question if art will become obsolete always arises. This concern often reflects the fears about technology ability to replicate, suppress, or replace human creativity and the traditional forms of art making. To explore this question, I will frame it in my personal use of AI. To speculate the impact of news media in mental health, yes, there was a time I was at lunch with my family, and I was feeling how the news were messing with my nervous system, with my mental health, and how can this be addressed in a large scale. So I conceived an artwork that is reading most of the newspapers in real time and analyzes the sentiment of news stories and paints accord the news sentiment. So positive news, they have warm colors. Negative news, they have cold colors, and neutral news, they have neutral colors. This is just an example of how the artwork paints in real time and confronts the visitors. And with sentiment analysis here, I use AI to read the sentiment of news stories. To raise awareness about deepfakes, and how it can threaten our democracy. In 2019, I conceived an artwork that writes his own thoughts about current events in society. And to do this, I'm just showing you a recording of how it would generate. This is obviously some deepfake ideas. Visitors on the National Museum of Contemporary Art here in Lisbon were confronted with this object, with this word cloud, where you would see these thousands and thousands of words, with the words of the day being more present, shorter memory. And then on the sculptures in the bottom, the sculptors will write their own thoughts. And eventually, the sculptors were posting their thoughts on Twitter. So they have their own social media account. Sometimes this can be very funny. You know, like I record a little bit of the Twitter account. O Natal está a matar as casas de banho. So there is thousands of very humorous jokes, but it can be very frightening also, because imagine this autonomous system working without ethical principles, for instance, in politics. So we use generative AI in natural language processing. So why are artists concerned with AI? It's because of technology. We are aware of the long history of art and technology. You know, influence and being influenced by it, challenging business, the way artists do art, copyright, royalties, distribution, but also opening access to people and leading to new art movements. Just think about photography, how then eventually it led to Impressionism, and then how it opened the vanguards in the 20th century. Also remember that in this time, artists were the only ones until making images and manipulating reality. So what changed with AI? We passed from a period of technology of production to the 20th century of reproduction to a moment we have generative technology. So what is happening is that we are suppressing time. And we are radically suppressing something that is very important, that is the creative process. Is where artists make questions, they have to deal with their emotions, they have to make mistakes and come with new thoughts. And we are now aware of these new generative image technologies like DALL-E or Midjourney. And of course, it has a problem, but it's a legal problem. My colleague Jacobina is going to address you, because these large companies have been using the artist's artwork without giving them consent or compensation or even credit. And beside this legal situation, my belief is that this will generate very soon a new mainstream idea of fast food art that is created, imagine, created and forgotten in 2 seconds. But generative AI will also open new opportunities in the creative industry. As an example of my colleagues, my friends here, Luna Ring just sent me this video. This video is about a generative system doing VJing by itself. It was very funny for me to see this, because when I was in college 20 years ago, I was starting to do VJ, and every week I had to produce new images, mix them real time, and then the week after, people already saw those images, and then so it will be like almost impossible for a human to continue this pace of working. And so in my presentation, I presented here 2 ways of creating with artificial intelligence. One that is prompt-based and one that is data-driven. And in my personal view, it's not about, the question is not about how AI can replace what we already do well, like making paintings, images, or making music. It's how it can help us artists applying creativity in things we cannot do with traditional mediums, that is data, to respond to a society that is already largely based on data. And to finish my presentation, I want to share with you the last example I co-created here with some colleagues in Champalimaud, where we try to recover memories from elderly people.
Vamos fazer coisas sérias, que o que anda para aí é uma porcaria. E tinha...
É lá!
É o estudo do jornalismo.
Olha aquele estudo.
Sim, sim. Era. Olha que coisa linda. Era cá embaixo no resto de chão. Isto. Ai, que altura. O estúdio da Tobes era um sonho.
So what we did is that we designed a smell workshop where we give them things to smell, different scents, and then this went directly to their memories without going to the cognitive system, and we record these memories, and then we create a software to interact with these images. So we were able to reinforce elderly people identity and open space for a new era of storytelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodolfo. Thank you, Lydia and Eric, for orchestrating this. Good evening, everyone. So from all the presentations, it is evident that AI is changing our economies, our society, and ultimately our lives. Its potential is unquestionable. From groundbreaking developments in healthcare, as João mentioned, carbon emission management that Herman mentioned, accessibility to education, augmentation of decision-making, and creation of new forms of artistic expression, AI is also changing the legal profession. I've been researching and working on AI for about 6 years, and I'm using more than one AI tool every day, multiple times per day, for my work for the past year or so. From correcting and writing emails, summarizing and changing the format of documents, confirming if my Portuguese is correct, and getting ideas and creating images for this presentation. But would it replace lawyers? I don't think so. I'm sorry to say to the ones that they're running to kill the lawyers first, but the system is a bit behind still. It's hallucinating excessively. But also, the technology as such, and its various uses, as we will see, presents a lot of challenges, from biases in healthcare to elevated carbon footprint when it comes to training of LLMs, an increase on plagiarism and infringement of copyright, to elaborate deepfakes that spread misinformation and fake news, endangering our democratic processes and values. AI as a tool, in reality, can aggravate our very humane problems. But let's see a bit in more detail what are the inherent challenges of the technology. As humans, we make a finite number of decisions per day. Then we get tired, we eat, we sleep, and we start all over again. That is not the case with AI. Depending on its computer power, it can double, triple, quadruple the number of decisions every day, every moment. Now think of all the faulty, biased, and noisy decisions that you make every day. These decisions can be used to train AI models, as Simone mentioned. And these systems can make their own biased decisions. And considering the automated scale of the capacity to make decisions, it can scale our own biases. The other side of the problem lies on the so-called black box problem or algorithmic opacity. In simple terms, when I have a machine learning or a deep learning AI model, I can see the input, I can see the output, I don't know what happened in there. And of course, this is a problem when it comes to law, because if I don't know what happened in there, I don't know whose fault it is or who is responsible to correct the error, and most probably I cannot correct the error either. Now, if we take this and we see the entire AI ecosystem, these legal challenges become even more complex because we have different interests, different players, and also a global economy. At an EU level, we have been discussing these challenges for about 7 years, but only last week, the European Parliament formally approved the AI Act. And this is a landmark regulation, marking a pivotal moment in shaping the future of AI, not only for Europe, but around the world, as it is the first comprehensive regulation on AI. So how does the AI Act look like? Well, it's very big. It's about 458 pages. But what does it say? So first of all, it has a very broad scope of application. This means that it covers more or less everyone that involved in the ecosystem, so both companies that are providing AI, but also companies that they are using AI. But also, it has an extraterritorial scope. What does that mean? It means that it applies also to AI systems that, although they are not developed here, they are used here in Europe. So they are either put into the market or they have an output that impacts the market. Very simply put, every single time that you're using ChatGPT, every response to your prompt has an impact in the EU. So OpenAI is subject to the regulation. Another very important point is that it does not regulate AI as a technology. It regulates use cases of AI. So it follows what we call a risk-based approach, meaning different obligations for different AI use cases depending on the levels of risk. And we have certain cases that they are completely prohibited to be put into the EU market because they are fundamentally against our own European values. For example, social scoring, mass surveillance. Also, we have high-risk cases, meaning I know there are some risks, but I'm accepting them, provided that the companies that they are developing those systems or that they are using those systems comply with all those strict rules that we have put in place in the AI Act. And these use cases are the most common AI use cases in Europe, in Portugal as well. For example, AI in HR, AI in sectors such as health, energy, banking and finance, insurance, education, law enforcement, and in the course of election systems. Also, there is an additional part that is regulated, that is those AI systems that they work very closely with humans. And since they work very closely with humans, they have additional transparency obligations. For instance, deepfakes, generative AI models. And then we take those use cases and we impose obligations that they can cover transparency, bias assessment, data governance, and so on. And we have new authorities to monitor compliance with these obligations and impose very high fines in case of non-compliance. But now leaving in part the regulation and going to a specific AI use case. So when you register to the event, you were asked to say what types of AI you're using. And you're using different tools, but more or less you're all using generative AI models. It's true that in November 2022, ChatGPT changed the course of AI adoption. So it makes sense also that we are talking a lot about its legal challenges. So if we wanted to group those challenges, they will fall in these three categories. And at this point, it is important to note that AI is not lawless. We didn't just need the AI Act to regulate it. It is subject to the already existing regulatory framework. And in reality, the challenges of generative AI are challenges of applying the already existing framework that is very anthropocentric to something that is not human. So if we were to see a bit in more detail the challenges, in relation to using art for AI training, Rodolfo already touched upon this. But in Europe, in fact, we do have a framework that tells us how we can use information that is made available to the public. So in theory, if I make freely available one article of mine and I do not opt out from data mining, ChatGPT can use it to train itself. That doesn't mean that it can copy it. And also, if my article was subject to subscription, again, you wouldn't be able to access it. Now, in the US, the case is not exactly the same, and that's why we have all these class actions that are making the news for copyright infringement. But a problem remains still here in Europe, and that's why in the AI Act there is an obligation to the OpenAIs of this world to disclose a list of the sources that they're using to train their models. Moving on to another challenge, AI art, and I put it in quote marks because in reality it's not art. It seems that it's challenging our notions of what is art, but not really, and not for long. Because in reality, copyright protection is very intertwined with human nature, intent and human expression of creation. And we can agree that this does not exist in my prompt, and however, it's unquestionable that it exists in the work of Rodolfo. Now, the more sophisticated AI becomes, the more elaborate are the cases of its unlawful use by us, by humans. So it is a fact that deepfakes have increased the cases of fraud, and also the case of misinformation, which is a topic that becomes particularly important in a year as 2024, where more people around the world than ever will head to the polls. And the challenge is very big, and however, it's important to remember that it's not only the law that we have that needs to change. And for that is that a crime that is committed using AI, it's still a crime punished by law. We don't care that it's using AI. And the AI Act, if we could try to sort of cover something, it mandated that when we are using, let's say, generative AI systems to create images, such as the ones that I showed you, or when we're using deepfakes, we need to flag it as such. And how do we flag it? We flag it by, let's say, a watermark that we cannot manipulate. So what's next when it comes to AI and law? The AI Act will probably enter into force sometime at the end of April, beginning of May. And companies, depending on the obligations that they will have between 6 to 36 months to comply, and probably I will be very busy. At the same time, there will be probably some other guidelines that will help us a bit align the existing obligations with the new ones to avoid overlaps. But law authorities and lawyers can do as much. In my opinion, from all the presentations, it has become clear that there is not a bad technology, an unlawful technology. There are unlawful uses of the technology. So since the law, to a large extent, follows society, I think we will also need to raise our own AI awareness, our digital literacy, and reevaluate our work, societal, and very humane values. Thank you. Back to you, Eric.
So, thank you, Jacovina, and all of our speakers. Each of our speakers tonight has shown us some way that AI is impacting their lives and our lives already. What will living with AI mean for us over the next few years? Many of the talks were actually about how humans and human society might change because of AI. Disruption, in some sense, was a common theme, though for good or bad, it's not always clear. So I guess I'd like to take a little personal perspective and step back. So both Simona and Rodolfo reminded us that disruptions by technology are not new. In fact, humans have been inventing technology as long as we've been human. The recent examples, like photography or the printing press, had big disruptions on the societies of their time. Photography displaced some aspects of art, but it created others. The photo became a reliable indicator of truth just until we learned how to alter them. The printing press allowed the rapid spread of information as never before possible, but it displaced the jobs of scribes, fomented the Protestant Revolution, and caused widespread conflict. So, Germain talked to us about AI and its role in changing how we're using it to create new tools, how it's changing engineering. Humans have been engineering their world since the beginning of modern human society, when we used agriculture and farming, which was our first sort of major engineering innovation, to change the landscape around us. It also required us to create a new diversity of tools, and it really allowed us to settle down and create modern human societies. It also allowed us to create concepts that never existed before, like empire, job, debt. And as we settled and had more resources, we were able to specialize and develop professions that eventually became the ones we know today, like doctor, engineer, scientist, artist, and lawyer. Every major technological revolution since that first agricultural invention has produced some wave of disruption. Another engineering technology revolution was metallurgy. Humans used to use stone tools for hundreds of thousands of years. And then copper and bronze came along and changed everything. Bronze made better tools, especially better weapons, and so it displaced the older stone technology. And places that were in the right location at the right time and had the right resources, like Cyprus here in the Mediterranean, went from being a fishing village to one of the richest societies in the Bronze Age because they were in the middle of a trading route that allowed them to get tin from England and Afghanistan, and they had copper mines. But bronze also saw the rise of military empires, and those societies that had access to these critical metals or the resources became powerful because they were at the right place at the right time. The Industrial Revolution is often invoked when people discuss AI disruptions. It allowed for the mass production of cheaper goods, but it also requires a lot of energy. First coal and then oil became the most valuable substances in the world. And oil companies and the nations that happened to have oil underground were able to profit power factories and, of course, armies. And oil provided us also with things like plastics, another engineering, another new tool. But plastics also have become an environmental problem with their lack of degradability and microplastics. So each of these technological revolutions has had some unintended consequences. These have probably mostly benefited humans in the long run, but they've also caused harm, and we have to think about the consequences that we may not be planning for. I also want to I think Jacobina and Rudolfo both hinted at a question, sort of, how does being human relate to creating art? And one of the first artifacts that archaeologists consider signs of modern human culture is in fact art. Around 50,000 years ago, we started doing figurative paintings of some form. Interestingly, it's around the same time that we think we really believe humans had modern language, though we can't be sure because we didn't leave any record of it. However, these are now the two things that are really being challenged by AI. They're making us begin to question ourselves and what it could be that could be like us. So today we see that there are powerful people, some of whom we've mentioned, Sundar at Google, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, which is the current headline of the day, and Sam Altman. They're all fighting for control over the power and the direction of AI, and the entities that control and profit it from them. Companies like Google and Meta, they have the data and the computing resources needed to train these new AIs. This doesn't necessarily mean they were the original inventors, and the question becomes, do they deserve to control the direction of AI and our society? Now, a second lesson we might take from this history is that these technical revolutions required humans and society to adapt. But, I said that art and language and sort of our modern human brain probably was the same for the last 50,000 years, and 10,000 years ago when we invented modern agriculture in our modern societies, we had a lot of time to adapt. When bronze replaced stone tools, it required techniques to be developed. The tools had to change to take advantage of the new material. Over time, making stone tools was reduced to a few uses, like grinding stones to make flour. Eventually, iron and steel replaced bronze. And again, human culture needed to adapt. However, historically, these changes caused by technological revolutions have taken place over thousands or hundreds of years. And so while our brains haven't changed in the last 50,000 years, our culture has adapted again and again. And as knowledge is accumulated, especially after the scientific revolution, the rate at which we develop these new technologies is growing exponentially. In fact, as we've just seen in the last 10 years, the growth of AI has been exponential. And our ability to create AIs that are near human capacities has exploded, at least in specific tasks. Our human nature is part biology, adaptable, but fundamentally evolving quite slowly. And it's part culture, education, as James talked about, the accumulation of knowledge, what we give our children, which can adapt faster, but is still not instantaneous. And at the rate that current AI technology is developing, one question we have to ask ourselves is our culture ready to adapt? Can it adapt fast enough? Do we have the mechanisms in place? As a neuroscientist who studies humans, human psychology, human decision-making, and group decision-making, I have some questions. I don't know that we know enough yet about ourselves and our culture and those mechanisms. One of the things that's often said is we need to align AI with our own interests, what we are and how we want to be. But to do that, we have to know ourselves well enough to do it. And then we need to implement in our political systems, our legal systems, and our economic systems the things that will allow us to handle the disruption that AI might cause. So with that, I'd like to finish. I think that we can take some lessons from this. We should try to think about how to distribute the benefits that might come from AI equally, regardless of who happens to have been in control at the time that these things were developed or who happens to have the data. And we might try to slow things down. Hopefully things like the new EU AI Act will help us with this. But it's something we need to be conscious of and we need to be active participants in. So with that, I'd like to hand the floor back to Lydia so that we can have a little discussion.
Thank you, everyone. This was a really interesting run through how AI is affecting us today. And I would like to start this discussion by considering some questions and concerns that you all mentioned during the registration. Thank you all for your help in shaping this event. And the question that I would like you to ask you I would like to have an answer in just one sentence, please, is if an AI system fails, who do you think is responsible or accountable?
It's a very difficult question, but I would say it's humanity, because we humans create we create the AI, we develop the AI, and also as the end consumers, we are using it and shaping it. But I also think it's maybe important to ask what kind of situation we would be in where AI feels that we have to blame it. So maybe something already went wrong beforehand if there's no more human-machine interaction.
Well, in healthcare, as an example, I would say that it depends. You have to define first an intended use for your medical device. This can be autonomous, or it can be like a decision support system. If it's autonomous, it goes back to the vendor. If it's the clinical decision support system, it's the doctor that it gives the final okay. So it's the doctor that has the full responsibility. It depends.
Yeah, I think I agree with João to some extent. I think you first would have to define what we understand by failure. From an educational perspective, I suppose, given what I said earlier, you might define failure as a system which fosters a culture where students are encouraged to kind of work the system in order to get the grades they think they need in order to succeed. And so in that case, the entity responsible would be the educational systems.
What would I say? It's very challenging, these questions, because if it fails, who's affecting? One person, one society itself, the whole countries? And here it comes the challenge, who allow this to fail. There was no any monitoring around that, right? And actually, there's autonomic properties on this AI or not. I think it comes from the part of engineers who are developing this, but also the ones who allow in somehow that it can go in somehow as a kind of black box without having any monitoring or any heavy testing. As an imagine, in law, there's a lot of regulations on how AI can be applicable in industrial environments. And in somehow there's kind of regulation or jurisprudence about who can be prosecuted in somehow if those events happen.
This is a complex question because we need to define the context of failure. But I try to address this situation with the paintings, with the sentiment at the paintings, when you are confronted and with the artwork, and there comes the news about Trump won the elections, and suddenly you have the AI painting with a warm color, and for you that is very negative, and you think the AI failed. So I addressed this cognitive bias, and that's something that is very important for us to think also, that ultimately this question is about our responsibility of what we want to automate or not in society.
First of all, I think we've been spending too many hours together today because everyone gave a very lawyery reply. So indeed, it depends. It depends on all the circumstances, but I think everyone is right at the end because there is not necessarily one player that will be responsible. It might be all of them, or it might be only the one using the technology and not even the one developing it. So yes, it depends.
Yeah, I guess I would lean on the humans, but I guess I would say it's one of those things that we may have to adapt our definition of responsibility over time, right? And we see this also even within humans. We take different views on responsibility for people who are in different psychiatric states. So maybe it's something that we're going to have to think about as a definition.
Makes sense. Thank you. Makes sense. I have also a question for James. You mentioned in your talk that while AI may not change the true goals of education, you implied that we may need to rethink how we reach them. So what do you think are the biggest opportunities and challenges AI brings to education and to learning?
I think that the opportunities and challenges depends on your perspective. I think it could well be seen as two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
I think for many people, it will be challenging that AI acts as a kind of catalyst to make us, as I suggested before, to rethink what it is that we want from education. And for the people who are currently benefiting from the system, the education system as it is, that may be a challenge to them because that kind of doesn't necessarily suit their position in the system as it currently stands. But I think for those people who are not being served well by the system currently, I think that's where the opportunity lies, that those people who are not able to access education in the same way as everyone else, that's what we should be looking at. I think AI has a massive potential to democratize a lot of education, to be able to act as a personal tutor, as I mentioned earlier, to think about having a personalized, tailored education on tap any time of day, at any point in your life, is a massive opportunity.
Thanks. Simon, I also know that you think a lot about educational measures. Do you have a comment on what we said?
Yeah, of course, I agree with James, but I think also from my talk it became very obvious that we need to educate on cognitive biases. And I think, just giving information maybe is not enough. That doesn't mean that science communication itself, for example, is obsolete. It's just that we maybe need to think of more holistic education models. So I would envision science communication connected with media literacy, and then also more non-formal education in terms of emotional intelligence, self-knowledge, self-awareness. Non-violent communication, I think, is very important, and anything that nurtures empathy and human connection. So I would highly vote or advocate for a holistic educational approach, combining formal and non-formal education.
Yes, thank you. João, I would like to ask you how you feel about the exponential growth of well-being and health apps, and how also address how this affects data protection in the sector and that requires so sensible data.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great. I think it means that those guys that are trying to keep AI closed, that Eric mentioned, are not succeeding. So it's democratizing this, and it's creating lots of opportunities for us to revolutionize care. Regarding data and the sensitive nature of healthcare data, I think today we have means of protecting everyone's personal information, which is, of course, of major importance. But just imagine how much we can gain if the data is shared, if we have longitudinal data from the population, and researchers can access that data in a safe way, leading to much more discoveries and healthier lives and quality of care. I think it would be great, and I think we have the means to do that.
Okay, so we should
I
use the data and
I
don't be afraid
agree.
of it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's Rodolfo, in the arts, there's also a big question of data protection and copyright. What do you think about it?
Like I said, I think it's a problem like that has to be addressed legally. Uh, but as I have the opportunity to, I just maybe want to point at something that Eric said also about we don't know yet what is a body, what is a mind. And I heard often some scientists saying, like maybe scientists working for these companies, that AI is almost achieving the human brain, or at least parts of the human brain. Human beings are not just a brain. Brain is part of a body, and eventually this brain exists because we have a body, we have a heart. And I'm more concerned with this thing of the data. It's a problem because at some to the data issue because at the same time I feel very excited about some possible ideas that we can create in the future. For instance, I'm starting a project to try to create a portrait with human data with the Faculty of Medicine in Lisbon, but I cannot have access to the data of the patient, so we have to do it in a different way. But also, just just a short comment, like what I said about suppressing time. We are not sure again, and psychology will have to study this in 5 to 10 years. What will happen with our psychology by suppressing time? Because we already know, like we use Google Maps to go there, we use everything to go fast, so we shorten the process. And I'm very concerned because also parallel to this, depression is going to be the biggest problem in the 21st century in the next 20 years. And causing the biggest harm in the economy because of and we are just fueling. I see a parallel here. So we are just fueling one thing with the other, and we need to address this.
This is actually a really nice takeover for the next question, because I would like to tackle the issue of the fast pace of AI, and that Eric mentioned, and maybe ask Simon, because you talked about how some cognitive biases, with the cognitive biases we struggle to manage in face of so much information, and with AI it's growing exponentially. So what do you think AI will make this easier or harder for us, or do you have any other considerations about it? A lot of them.
I'm just thinking how honest I am about this answer. Well, in my opinion, I think it, as already Rodolfo said, everything gets speed up. And as I also said in my talk, we are bombarded literally with information, like in all kind of sensory level. And I don't know if we are not having a discussion about how we want to incorporate AI in our daily lives in a way that we still focus on well-being and human connection, or whatever it means to be human. I don't see how things will get slower. I think AI is an amazing tool to speed certain things up. We discussed today in many different contexts that we can optimize things, that we can get rid of redundant work that maybe takes more time than actually is enjoyable. But I think we should have a discussion about what we do with this gained time. Because right now I feel like it's, okay, we gain time, so let's do more of the same thing and produce more. And burnout is just one of the biggest new disease cases. And I would appreciate to have a discussion like we had today, more in the public and on a political level, on how we spend this time well. Let the machine do the things that are tedious and annoying, and then we get creative and focus on human connection, yeah, and innovate new things that are enjoyable. But maybe someone else wants to comment too. I think it's a very nice question.
Yes, maybe Jacovina, also because regulation needs to keep up and...
Yeah, so I already mentioned it a bit in the presentation. So law follows what is happening. You cannot go fast enough. We can argue that it should not go fast enough, faster than reality at the end of the day, or to shape it. So it makes sense that it follows, especially when it comes to technology. The problem is that it usually cannot keep pace. And the AI Act understood that. Like the first draft did not, had a list of solutions that was calling techniques to achieve AI, and some of them were Excel sheets. So they understood that this did not make sense, that it would become obsolete very fast. So they made this like use case approach, and that list of high-risk cases that we're mentioning that is touching upon so many sectors that we're all working on, it is dynamic. So it's supposed to be updated every year, and it's supposed exactly to mirror what is happening to society. So something that right now for us is very high risk, in 5 years' time, because I would say normally 10, but I think it's going faster than what we are expecting, might be a commonplace solution. We might actually prefer, let's say, to be submitted to an HR AI instead of a human AI, or like a creditworthiness assessment made by an AI instead of someone that will see that I'm Greek and means that I cannot pay my loan, for example, because failed economy. But you see, it's it has to do with notion and perception, so I think that will change. But that is only one part. And I think like Eric mentioned it, and it's very important. Right now we're only discussing it philosophically at a basis of law, how we can change something that was so inherent to human nature, even indirectly. We're talking about qualities that they are purely human in the law, even without mentioning humans. Mm-hmm. So acts like acting in good faith, something that we can understand or interpret somehow without really having a definition. And now we will have to adapt this as a standard of behavior for a machine trained based on our own decisions and data. So that will be a very tricky thing to apply at the end, more traditional and embedded notions as it is with copyright. Like we can understand art in an emotional level, so we can still separate the fast food art that Rodolfo was mentioning from something that actually is a matter of expression.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I also have a question for Germain. We live in a time where sustainability is really important. And I wanted to ask you that knowing how much energy AI consumes, could you talk about a little bit more about how the goal of reducing carbon footprint could reconcile with the use of AI?
Yes. So at the end, AI can help us to design different systems, because there's a branch of the generative AI which is called generative design. Generative design can reduce the times for the research, new hardware or creating new pieces, and do this in somehow loop that it will take us just changing one parameter, doing the whole process and the whole testing, and actually it can reduce the time. Simulations like have been, as an example, NASA. NASA are creating the new hardware that it can be put in the rockets. And this process reduces the time or the production and simulation of this new hardware from 18 months to just a few hours. And actually, these pieces were created, and these pieces were actually implemented, meaning it's not only the part of a revolutionary or doing the revolution of the design, but also designing and creating things that are going towards this example. As an example, creating a hardware, or in this case, carbon capture systems, right? We know that everything causes emissions, but sometimes go net zero, producing with renewable energies, since somehow, for now, it's almost impossible to achieve, right? But at the end, what we can do is the other way. Like, okay, we are doing these emissions, but why don't we have or designing something that can capture those emissions, and in somehow we can have a net zero environment. And at the end, just to finalize here, it can help us with the simulations. As I was showing these gas turbines, recently, there are a lot of companies who are doing the simulations how these gas turbines can run also in e-fuels like green hydrogen, right? So it's not only on the designing, but in the simulations that it can help us to speed up. AI, as everyone has said, like, is going to increase or is going to be in a fast pace when it comes doing this kind of the revolutions. And of course, the part of the simulation, just imagine how the planes works, how different trains, or how everything that we see can be in somehow applied in the part of this design.
Thank you. I'm trying to. So, Rodolfo, one interesting impact
Present.
one interesting impact of AI is that everyone is talking about art. With the rapid growth in the power of generative AI, it seems to lead to more people expressing themselves creatively. At the same time as you refer to generative art as fast food. How do you see this impacting our creativity, like as a society?
So one amazing thing that is happening is that, you know, the amount of conversations with people from different areas, like law, medicine, psychology, education, are happening here, but are also happening in my projects. You know, I'm working with blind people, with elderly people, with neuroscientists. So, like, if you work with AI in a critical way, you know, you can. It depends the way you design a question, an artistic question, and it really. So it's almost like when I say fast food art, because like. A lot of, I heard that a lot of artists in the art school, young artists, they are getting a bit confused about their future because, you know, oh, I'm going to spend here years drawing, and then it's almost like a call that there is another way to engage with AI, and a more critical way. And this is a way that, you know, we can, in an artistic way, we can shape and bring, we can look to our society through the lens of data. And if, you know, if it was so hard, and sometimes so hard to process data to arrive to also an interesting conclusion with a machine learning model, you can fasten this process. And the thing with the fast food art is this kind of, is not my quote, is something that we in the community we're calling it. It's because what these companies are doing is something amazing that takes artists a lot of time to take, is feeding our ego. Oh my God, I created such an amazing thing. And, you know, and feeds the ego, and yeah, you didn't create that thing. You're just making money to the company. And they are doing really well. So that's why I call it fast food, because, you know, people will see those images and they will forget, and you know, and anyone that is already very well trained visually, you know, I can recognize an image when it's generated by these systems. I see, and most of us will recognize it very soon. You know, it's a little bit like when the television changed for a better quality. And we got used to that quality. We look the image like back in the, oh my God, how we think that was perfect, you know? So we adapt also very fast. And very soon, so we are fighting this. It's not a fair fight, because at the same time, we are talking a lot about art, what is good. Like, it's amazing that, and I've been in a period where so many people are asking questions about art and arts. On another side, it's like these companies are exploring our ego in a very If I say, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. It's getting late and we are running out of time. So I wanted to ask just a last quick, so it's not a quick question, but I hope it's a quick answer. Um, so I would like to ask each one of you with a quick, one benefit you would like AI to bring us in the future?
I need to start again?
No.
I could start. So,
Please.
I think it could be both ways. Or make the humans more humans, meaning avoid our repetitive tasks. Most of us, we work 8 hours or more, and most of us doing repetitive tasks every day. Why not automate that and let the humans being humans enjoy what are they doing, like putting in the art, the design, having philosophical discussions, enjoy what is outside, right? Because just imagine you sleep 8 hours, you work 8 hours minimum. What's happening with the others? You have to do a lot of things. Why you cannot enjoy yourself in the time you are being here because we have limited time? This is one. And the other is the other discussion that we have here with my colleagues is, yes, it can increase our productivity, but are we going to be demand more productive every day? Meaning, is not going to allow us in somehow to escape of these 8 hours, let's say that. Probably is going to be increase the pressure on us on deliver faster, better, and they release or reduce the time to market. And we were going to be key parts on that as well.
It's enough, okay. At least it's a fast answer. So it was a really great pleasure to hear all your perspectives on the present of AI. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Now, outside, you will have the opportunity to talk to all of us over drinks and also interact with some of the demos that we have outside that are submersion, the one that you saw in the beginning, the digital surgery lab talked about by João, and the AI bar. All of this are included in a preview of meta-immersion healing algorithms happening in May. Okay, good. Meta-immersion is Champalimaud's free circle of events that combine science, art, and technology in service of human knowledge and health, and we welcome you all to it. We live in exciting times full of opportunities, but also challenges. And now is the time to think about how we want to shape the future of AI. So please join us in May also, a week before, in our last event on AI about the future. Thank you all for being here this evening, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.